Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Would Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Greetings.
Hello.
Good to see you. Feel like it's been a little bit.
It has been a little bit. I've had to fly solo. I'm tired of flying solo.
Yeah, I don't know what you've been up to, but I love your flying solo. I went back and I updated my leave policy.
There you go.
Because I hadn't looked at that in a couple of years, and so I updated that and got
Always
some good
homework,
tips.
right? Always homework.
Yeah, good. So thank you.
Yes.
For that.
Yes, you're welcome. What you got for me today?
Well, do you remember a couple of months ago, maybe 6 months ago or so, or maybe not that long, whatever, you cornered me and were like, oh, let's make this a What Would Kuba Do episode.
Yeah,
you framed it like really...
that session.
Well, you blindsided me with that, but I didn't catch it until I was like, oh, wait, she's blindsiding me right now. Like, you were so smooth in your delivery of it. And I wanted to do it back to you today.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Just things that I know I've thought about, or colleagues of mine that listen to the podcast, or some that don't listen, but they'll hear me talk about you and they're like, what is this? Like, what is this consultant? Because I think they all think it's, like this cookie cutter template consulting, and I'm like, that's not at all what Bethany does. So I have this hodgepodge of questions. If you don't want to answer one, you don't have to.
Oh, I have the opportunity to skip?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
better. I like this
Yes.
game. I'm
Yes.
prepared now.
Because I was trying to think of questions like practice related, like what do you do in this case or what do you do in that case? And I should have written them down as I thought of them. I've got one like that, so I might get to that. But I think otherwise I kind of wanted to put you on the spot and kind of see like things that I don't even know, even though I've worked with you for so long.
You don't know. Oh, you don't know the answer. You don't know what I'm going to say.
Yeah. And I think because you're so... You're going to get mad if I share this, but you were driving out to a client's recently.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the night, 11 p.m.,
Yes.
you hit a deer.
Yes, I did.
What? You probably didn't get to bed till 3 or 4.
It was about that. Yeah.
And you turned around and you went to the clients. Did your whatever you were doing, your consulting.
Yeah.
And then I asked you and you were like, no, the only people who know are my husband and you. And I was just like, what in the world? Like, your professionalism... Like, this client still, probably, unless they listen to this podcast, they have no idea that you were in this accident. I'm like, what else do I not know?
No. Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to ask you some stuff here.
Oh.
And it's going to be easy, I promise.
Okay, good.
We'll see.
I'm ready.
Okay, so you ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Have you ever fired a client?
Yes, I have. Many years ago, I had a client that I was helping with some hiring. So back at that time, it was just me. And even back then, there was hiring issues. And so they asked for my support. I was working with them on a bunch of other things. But, hey, can you help us with at least the pre-screening process of these candidates? And I said, absolutely. And so... the first couple of candidates that I sent over, I thought were strong. And this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. So it was a different pool of candidates. That's back in the day where you could put a job post up and you had 50 candidates available. And out of those, like 15 were amazing. And then you're selecting out of the 15. So I really picked what
Good old days.
I
Good
know,
grief.
right? Man, those were nice. So I picked what I thought was kind of like the cream of the crop. And I sent those people to them, and I wasn't a part of the face-to-face interview, and they're just like, yeah, no, these people are not going to work for our patient base. And long story short, after continuing to send some people, the awkward conversation came up of there was a certain ethnicity that they were looking for and a certain ethnicity they were not looking for. And I continued to send the wrong one, and I made it clear that I was not going to screen for that, that was unethical and not how I function. And, so basically either I was going to continue to help them in that process and do it my way, or I wasn't going to help them. And so I decided to no
Not
longer
help them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, one and only client that I've had to terminate. And again, it ended peacefully, but it's just not something that I could support them with. So
How awkward.
Yeah.
That's very awkward.
Yeah.
Okay, so that works out well with one of the other questions
wow,
I had
how
on the
about
list. What do you do if you know an RDA or a front desk or a RDH, whatever, was let go from one office and applies to another client's office? So like you're helping in the hiring process, and somebody you know, say we terminated somebody or whatever, and now that same candidate applies to another client of yours office.
So this is where I always tell people, whether it's the clients or the staff members, that the dental field is a small world, and it really is. So if I know somebody from another office that was fired, and I agree with that termination, I'm like, they earned that, either they were, for whatever reason, they got fired and I agree with it, then I'm always going to let my client that's looking to hire them know.
And you have to be, you don't have to be careful. Like we as the employer,
Exactly.
ex-employer has to be careful.
I'm
like
a neutral party.
Okay.
I'm a neutral party. So I have no commitment to that particular employee. I have no contractual relationship with them. I'm a third party that's hired by my client. And so I can, because I'm familiar with a lot of people in the field, I can represent myself in that and not it would not, for example, if you fired somebody and another one of my clients was looking to hire them, you've done nothing wrong by me telling my client that's looking to hire this person, because you didn't tell my other client about this person. I did. So my client that fired the person is protected because they're not sharing anything. It's me, the neutral party, that is sharing. So, and my mindset is I always want to, whoever my client is, I always want to protect them. And if I know that person was fired for legitimate reasons, then I'm going to tell them that. Now, every once in a while, somebody's terminated because it's just not a right culture fit. They're not a bad employee. It's just in that particular environment, they could not survive. And so I will still share, hey, by the way, I have worked with this person. These are some of the downfalls. However, in your environment, I think she would actually do really well. I would say that's rare. Most of the time, the person is fired for really egregious reasons. And so I do share that information.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Would you encourage your kids to go into the dental field, and why or why not?
I actually do encourage. I tell my kids all the time that the dental field is a great field, and I firmly believe
after
that.
everything you see, after all the drama.
Yeah, and so I've got my niece is in medical school right now, and she really teeter-tottered on dental or medical. Obviously, her grandpa, my dad, is a dentist, and what I always told her that didn't work, because now she's in the medical field, is you aren't going to, it's a medical job, but it strikes that balance between work and life. And so many of my so many of the people that I know that are in the medical field, they have a really much higher workload. They're on call. There's a certain on-call criteria that they have to have. Most people are having to serve on call at some point. They're having to do hospital duties on the weekends and things like that. So it's just harder to have a work-life balance. The dental field is actually that sweet spot where it's like, we are medical professionals, but most offices work 4 days a week and take off all this time for continuing education and CE trips and all of that. And so it's almost like this unicorn world to me, where you get the medical side of it and you get to be involved in the health of individuals, but you're not having to have these really crazy work schedules, even nursing schedules. You're working these 3 12-hour shifts. So that means 3 days a week, your family doesn't see you. Or if you're just becoming a nurse, a lot of times you're stuck with the night shift. So then your whole world's turned upside down. And that's for nursing. So I feel really passionate about the dental field being still a very strong field to be in. So I don't know. We'll see if any of my kids listen. I know I've got one that's already thinking medical. So I'm like, oh, well, whatever. But I'm going to keep saying the same thing.
Okay. I will have to sit on that one and think about that because I don't know. Well, I do know that I tell my kids no to the dental world.
Really?
Yeah.
Really. And I guess I have a different perspective because I have a dad that's 73 years old and still in it. And being the daughter of a dentist, it served us well. We had a very good life because he obviously made a good income as a dentist, so we never were hurting for anything. He had so much. If I look back, my dad was always there. I don't remember my dad not being there. Like, he was the one working on school projects with us at night. The weekends, we were out on the lake having, fun on our boat literally almost every weekend. So he was just there all the time. And I don't know, maybe physicians' daughters, in the medical world feel the same way. But I definitely feel like we had a lot of my dad because he was a dentist. And so I think I see it from that perspective as well. We had a really good life. Financially, we were well cared for. But more importantly, he was there. He wasn't having to do all these, work trips or weekend shifts or being so tired and stressed out that he wasn't available in the evening. He had a relatively low stress level is what I would say so that he could be there for us. So I think from that perspective too, I see it maybe a little bit differently.
So I don't know if then it's just me doing it to myself with mom guilt and stuff like that. And like you said, low stress level. And I don't feel like my stress level is low whatsoever. And I would say the source of my stress level is the practice. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I'll consider it. Although I don't think either of mine has any desire whatsoever to do any work altogether. So maybe I have nothing to worry about. We might be just fine. Okay. So what's, like, of all the pearls and wisdom you have, what would you say is maybe one, or maybe I'll give you two, but one piece of advice that you have for owners? Like, it doesn't matter if it's a small practice, big practice, pedo, ortho, general. Like, what is one thing that as you're serving your clients that you're like, dude, if you would just this, is there anything that you would say?
It goes back to, probably episode 4 for us, which is always coming back to your why. I feel like that is the persistent problem that I see when I sit with clients that are dissatisfied with their practice. And I come back to trying to ask questions about why do you do what you do? Like, what fulfills you? What brings you that personal satisfaction? And they've spent so long being in the trenches just executing the dentistry or executing the leadership that they haven't pulled up enough to think about that. Or they've been just in the trenches for 10 years and they can't remember, why did I even start a practice? What was the point of it all? And sometimes the point of it is strictly like, well, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a dentist and I'm supposed to start a practice. And they never put in the thought that they really needed to be able to even think about that. And to me, my theme is practice happy. And part of practicing happy is figuring out what you want out of this practice. What
makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is as unique as a fingerprint, in my opinion. What makes one practice owner happy is not and should not be the thing that makes another practice owner happy. So we have to make the practice something that truly does feed us and fuel us and bring us joy. Now, like parenting our kids brings us so much joy. Is there also a ton of heartache and a ton of stress and even, torture in the process? Absolutely. It's the hardest thing we'll ever do, but at the same time, it brings enough joy and satisfaction. The practice to me should be very similar, that it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of stress, but as long as it's also bringing us joy and we can sit back and count the blessings of being that practice owner, But to me, that doesn't happen naturally. That takes a lot of intentional effort and making sure the practice is fulfilling your initial why. And that why may change over the years. I think it has for you as well. But we got to always be bringing it back to what's my purpose in doing dentistry. And
So I think you're right about dentists, one, going, it's what I'm supposed to do. I feel like I get that vibe a lot from people I talk to. I think the other thing is we fool ourselves into going, if I'm an associate somewhere and I'm going, I would do it this way. I don't know why they do it that way. I don't know, like, why am I making this person money? I should just do it on my own. And we cocoon ourselves into this mindset that's like, oh, how hard is this? I've been through dental school. That was, talk about torture. And I survived that. And here I am interacting with patients and I'm providing dentistry and everybody else is doing it. I can get some drills and a chair and I can market, and I'll probably market better than this person's doing anyway, without any real thought to all the moving parts. And then you end up there and you're like, oh God. Why? And so if you didn't have a why to fuel you to begin with, other than this is what I'm supposed to do, or how hard could this be? Let me work for myself. That's just not enough.
it's not. It's not. And I don't think practice ownership is for everybody. I really don't. I think there's people out there that shouldn't own a practice. Not because they can't do it, but because it would be utterly life-shattering for them. Too stressful, too overwhelming, too negatively impactful for them, because they simply, I don't want to say they aren't built for it, but the skills required to be a practice owner isn't natural to them. So then they're fighting themselves every day. And I don't think it's worth it. I think there's plenty of great associateships that you can have out there and be an excellent dentist and be an excellent associate. I think we don't talk about that enough, because there are fantastic associates out there that have decided I am an associate, and they can have a great impact on that practice owner and on that team. And I think there's a place for that. What would our world be without associate dentists, right? So there can be purpose in that as well. And so I think we've got to be careful about just assuming, oh, it's so easy. I can jump into this and I should do this because that's what a dentist should do. I don't think that that's the case, honestly. So to me, you got to have a why in being a dentist. The nuts and bolts of your profession, you've got to have a why in that. But I think beyond that, if you choose practice ownership, you have to have a why.
So what would you advise then for, this is not on my list, just kind of thinking out loud here, but for the people that do fall into that boat, where now they're like, oh, if I do trace it back, it's like I left because I thought this dentist, I didn't like the owner dentists, they never gave me all the veneer cases, or, I was only making a percentage, or I wanted to use this lab and they wouldn't let me use that lab, or they wanted me to see a lot more patients and I was only comfortable seeing this many, like whatever it may be. And so now they don't really have a why. What do you recommend for that? I think that's where it comes down to clearer communication from the associate to the practice owner. So first of all, getting a clear why. So let's say for this particular person, their why is, I want to make beautiful smiles. Like I want to make aesthetic changes for my patients. I'm interested in the cosmetic side of it. That's what fuels me. That's what gives me my, purpose every day. I'm constantly looking at cases. I'm constantly perfecting my craft. Well, now I've got an owner doc that won't give me any of that. And that's what fills me, not just the productivity of that, but that's what makes me happy. Well, then you need to establish a conversation pattern with your owner doc. So sometimes what I'll see with associates is they're willing to bail. They're just like, oh, it's never going to happen here, so I'm moving on. Well, the owner doc never knew that that's what you wanted and that's what made you really happy. Sometimes I think a lot of this can be solved with just great communication. I've got this associate that I work with,
that has always been an associate. She knew from the time she became a dentist that she wanted to be an associate. She never wanted to own this. And again, this wasn't due to kids and all of this. This was just she wanted to be the best dang associate out there, which I love that because you don't find many associates like that. And so she recently stepped into a practice that didn't have the owner was there involved seeing patients, but there was no set communication structure for owner to associate. There was an office manager there that kind of was the mediator between everything, but so anyway, before she even signed on the dotted line, she and I worked together on this kind of quote unquote proposal for the owner, like, hey, I would love to join your practice. Is there any way we could have monthly, even if it's just 30 minutes, can we get together once a month? Because I want to make sure clinically that I'm delivering the dentistry that you want me to deliver. I want to be able to ask you questions because they weren't going to be there at the same time for the most part. So anyway, how cool is that she saw this vacancy like, oh, this is going to be a problem if I don't have face-to-face time with this owner doc. And before she even signs on the dotted line, she's starting to try to make an impact that's low cost of time for the owner doc, but is very valuable for her as an associate to ensure that she can maintain her impact in this particular practice. Associates need to do that. Right? If aesthetic cases are what fills them up, they've got to establish a structure of communicating with that owner doc. And maybe the owner doc says, I can't give you that, or I'm not willing to invest in the marketing, or I can't manipulate my schedule to make those cosmetic cases happen here. Maybe it literally can't work in that practice. Okay, but at least you've given the owner doc a chance to think about it before just bailing and moving on to the next place. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm just starting to go, and of course I'm siding with the owner side because that's where I am, but I start going, but what if you've got somebody asking for something unrealistic, like you want to do all these, but I've seen your fillings and I don't see how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank goodness we don't do cosmetic cases like that. I don't have to worry about that, but I think my point in saying that is I almost feel like a lot of people who have a lot of asks don't understand the whole reason to begin with why that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
They're quick to assume that owner doc is either an idiot who hasn't thought of it, and they've not realized that there's more to the equation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
You know, they're living in their little rose-colored or their blinders on.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just saying that's like, you know what you know.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the same conversation we keep having with staff.
Yeah.
I want this, I want that. Why can't we do this? Why don't we do it this way? And I'm like, there's a reason for that. I'm not just being an ass to be an ass. There's a reason for that. And it's out of my control. Like, that's what the state board requires, or that's what that insurance plan requires. Like, what do you want me to do about it?
Right.
But it's easy to just look at the parameters you want to look at and make some judgments and say, well, I could do this better on my own.
Yeah.
Could you?
Yeah.
So.
It's so much more involved and I would say any startup client that I work with that's starting their practice for the first time, that's probably the number one thing that I hear is it's so much more complex than I thought it was going to be. I'm like, yes, it is. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard work. It is not easy. So the person that's stepping into that with kind of this arrogance of, oh my gosh, I can do it so much better than my doctor that I used to work for.
And I'll be kind and say not arrogance, this whole like confidence and not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, okay, very good. So then what's one thing that you see owners doing that annoys you? That you think, why in the world do you do that? Or what were you thinking? Like, as you're working, I'm sure as you've worked with me, you've probably had that thought probably every other week, but like a recurring theme, again, amongst smaller practices, bigger practices, startups, regardless of the specialty. Is there something you're like, I don't understand why a practice owner would do this? Is there anything like that?
I would just say a repetitive theme that I see in problematic situations is not slowing down to seek advice. I think just charging forward with, well, I'm just going to do this. And oftentimes I'm brought in after that and like, oh no, we've got a really big problem now. Here, Bethany, can you help us fix this? So just forging ahead and making decisions quickly or in an uninformed way. So, and I think we've talked about this on one of our episodes, but it doesn't have to be a consultant. Just talk to people, get advice, before you make.
And that advice, not your mom or your husband or your wife if they're not in the field.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think just slowing down enough to process, is this a good short-term and long-term decision? And am I making a decision emotionally right now, or am I making a decision that's based on logic? And I see that happen daily in my work, that a dentist or practice owner has made a decision that wasn't the best decision, and then that has such an impact on the team. So then we're having to recover from that. And these are not huge long-term consequential decisions, but even the little fires that can happen when a dentist rushes into something, then you've got a team that's kind of out of sorts, and they're high stress. So anyway, I would just say slow down, think through decisions, talk to somebody, talk to a few other people before you start making decisions.
Do you have an example? What do you mean? Like,
yeah, I do have an example. So I have a situation that occurred not too long ago where I had a client that was needing to make some staffing changes, needing to elevate a certain person on the team, and needing to de-elevate a person on the team. Demote, yes. And again, not get rid of the person, but just change the roles and responsibilities. And ultimately, he figured out in his head what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it. I was not involved with him at this point, and made all the changes. Basically elevated this one to, I can't remember what he called her, but basically a leadership position. The one who had seniority and had been in a leadership position renamed her position. Well, little did he know, the person that he elevated, nobody on the team had respect for. So she was more of the take charge person. He loved her because he could pass tasks off to her. She would go and get it done. She would report back to him. There's really good communication that the two of them had because they're very similar. The other seniority lady had good long-term relationships that were built with the team, and she was an effective worker, but she was not as communicative with him and was more of the yes man, yes woman. And so he just saw her as not leading, but in all actuality, she was leading, but she was doing it in a very different way. And so who got elevated was this kind of bulldog type personality that really nobody liked. So that's one of those situations. Probably in his mind, it made a lot of sense because he had a certain perspective that was just his interaction with these two ladies, but he really didn't do the necessary research to figure out the impact of these two ladies before making that decision. So that would be an example.
I love that example because I could totally see, I'm pretty sure I was that person years ago. And, I've come a long way in asking, and because I think it is so easy to get in your head and you're seeing it from your viewpoint going, well, this is obvious. And then you're missing the subtle little things. And I think, especially if you don't have access to a Bethany or a consultant or a whatever, I mean, you don't have to have, it's nice if you can have a Bethany or another advisor, but even with something like that, like clearly that's not something you would go to your spouse for because your spouse cannot guide you. I mean, your spouse would be like, oh yeah, it sounds like she's a leader. Go ahead, without knowing any of the nuances of the situation.
Exactly.
And so to seek advice and counsel here would just be to pull employees in and, start going, okay, hey, who do you see? Or what has your experience been with this? Or what do you, like, just asking questions. So I think for me, that's where now, before we hire anybody, I want to get everybody's take on this person.
Yep.
And there's always different things. And I mean, even down to last summer when we were thinking about, do we fire this person? Do we, we had that dreadful firing 3 people in one day. But before we did that, I wanted to hear other perspectives because I clearly was seeing it one way.
Yeah.
And for me now, I'm like, okay, well, what does associate think? He's there more often than I am. What does front desk person think? So it's like, I don't even necessarily have to come to you with all of that. Just within the office, just asking questions and trying to gain a perspective other than your own. Something even as little as back with the pandemic and how most of us were doing text to check in. And so finally at a point, it was like, do we keep doing this? And in my mind, it made sense to do XYZ. Well, I almost made that decision on my own to be like, hey guys, this is what we're doing. And then for whatever reason, I paused and I was like, wait a minute. Does this work?
Right.
Like, it works in my mind and I like it because there's fewer people in the building and there's fewer people I have to talk to. Like, good, stay in your car, get out of here. But does that make sense for everybody? And then come to find at the front desk, even like one person felt this way, one person felt that way.
Right.
Well, RDHs, what do y'all think? RDAs, what do y'all think? And it was like, dude, if I had just stuck on and had only gone with what I was thinking,
yeah,
that was not the best choice. So I guess the takeaway from that is you're saying, get feedback.
Get feedback. And again, your team's going to be more on board with your decisions if they feel like they were clued in on them.
And if you were clued in and informed on the decision.
Yeah. And even if you're going to have to go against what one of your team members wants, there's an open line of communication where you've been able to explain, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and not everybody's going to be in agreement with your plan, but you at least are more informed. Am I making the right decision before I make this decision and then am suffering the consequences for forever, for months at least?
I like it. Okay, I have 2 more questions. Do we have time?
Yep.
Okay, so one of them is, what are your thoughts or concerns, or maybe there's no concerns, about either hiring like a pair of siblings or best friends, or dating amongst team members, whether it's, I don't have any male RDAs or hygienists, or front desk for that matter, but I think that's always been a concern of mine. So either if it's, staff dating each other, staff dating the doctor, the siblings are now, one's a manager and the other one's an RDA, like,
yeah,
can that work?
It can. I have actually seen it work. Or oftentimes you'll get, but maybe let's go with an RDA. You'll get an RDA on your team. You end up having another RDA opening, and your RDA is like, ooh, my best friend, works for so-and-so. So it's even down to best friends. And she would love to come and work here.
That always makes me pause. It makes me go, ugh.
So,
this could either be a very good thing or a giant disaster.
If I were to just have to say without any context, yes or no, I would say no. Because I think the times that it can go badly are more than the times that it goes well. Now, I think there's context to every situation, but to me, you get a couple besties in there, or you get a dating couple in there, and there is 100% going to be drama at some point. It also creates an imbalance. Like, oh, these two are always going to side together. So let's say it's, 2 RDAs that are dating one another, and you've got 3 RDAs. Okay, well, that creates an immediate imbalance. There's always a third wheel to the occasion.
What about siblings in that? What if there were 2 RDA siblings and then a third? Do you think that?
I would say if I've seen one situation be more successful, it's usually siblings.
Okay.
Which is surprising.
It would be the best friends or the dating that might.
That's the most concerning.
Okay.
That's the most concerning. But siblings, I've seen work really well. And I'm less inclined to say no if they're going to be in completely different departments. I've got one client that has a hygienist, and he just hired the sister as an RDA. And so even though they're clinically, they're 2 completely different departments. And the sister that was just hired, is brand new to dental. So she's not walking in with this confidence, with this let me show them what I'm going to show them. And I've got my sister to back me up. There's a humility there because she's brand new to the field. She has a lot to learn. And so I have seen siblings work better, and I am especially more comfortable with it if they're in two different departments. I would say be careful on a small team. If you've got a team of 3 or 4 and now 2 of them are siblings, it makes the risk that much higher for the practice, because if siblings get upset about something and they walk, you've lost half your staff. And it can throw the dynamics off on a smaller team. On a larger team, it can actually be a little bit more muted of a situation.
Okay. And then the last question I had for you is, if you weren't consulting, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a hard one to think about because I can't imagine anything but consulting. I would say if I wasn't consulting, before consulting, I got to teach college courses, communication courses, and I love teaching. So I would say if I wasn't that, I would be a college professor somewhere. And farming. Alongside.
Yeah, with all your goats.
With all my goats.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't know. I know there were a couple of pearls here. Yeah. And I was like, well, I just want to know these things. But I think we got some pearls in there too.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah.
All different perspectives to think about. So, all right.
You survived.
Thanks for quizzing me. I'm wiping the sweat off my brow. I'm good.
Well, I'm going to come back at you when I think of more of these, like, what would you do in this case, and make it more dental specific. I just need to start writing those things down.
Yes. I will not be prepared, but I'll be emotionally prepared for the next one.
Excellent.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.